Years ago, back when I was just getting into all this, I had a little security camera. It was a dirt cheap Chinese one. I don't remember the brand, but I know I paid next to nothing for it. And one evening, I'm poking around in my network, as you do, and I spot this camera talking to a server online, and it was clearly sending quite a lot of data, which was odd because, as far as I was concerned, that camera had exactly one job: watch my front door. It had no reason on earth to be chatting to anyone outside my four walls. I never did find out for certain what it was up to. Maybe it was compromised, maybe it was just built that way, and that was normal for it. I don't know to this day. I was still fairly new to all this back then, so I mostly just thought it was weird. But it was the first time it properly landed for me that a device sat on my network might not be doing what I assumed it was doing. It's something that I really wish somebody would have told me before I started. So that's what this video is. It's not a list of gadgets to go and buy, it's the stuff underneath the gadgets. The way of thinking about it that would have saved past me a decent chunk of money, a lot of time, and a hell of a lot of faff. So, go grab a coffee, I'll get one too, and then we'll get into it. I don't want you to see this as me telling you off. None of this is me wagging a finger at you and telling you what you've done is wrong. Every single one of these is a thing that I got wrong first, at full price, so that hopefully you don't have to. Think of them less as rules and more as signposts at a fork in the road. You are probably going to reach those forks. I just wish I'd been able to read the signs a bit sooner than I did. If you're not a beginner, then I'm curious to know how many of these you chuckled along with and how many you managed to avoid. Let me know in the comments or over on the Discord server. Pop a QR code around here. 1. The cloud is somebody else's computer and I don't want my house leaning on it. The first one took me ages to properly feel in my bones, and it's this. I don't like cloud-based tech. At least, I don't like it for me. For this example, when I say cloud-based, I mean the kind of smart device where you tap the switch on the app, that instruction doesn't just hop from your phone straight to the thing on your wall. It goes from your phone out to the internet, all the way to a server owned by some company, possibly on the other side of the planet, and then all the way back to the little plug that's sitting 2 meters away from you. Your command takes around the world an 80 milliseconds trip through a data center just to turn the bulb on. And most of the time that's fine. Most of the time it's quick and you never really need to think about it. The trouble is the times it isn't fine, and there are 3 of those. 1, your internet goes down. Now your lights don't work. Not because the lights are broken, the electricity's still flowing, the bulb's still perfectly good. It's because the middleman in the middle is suddenly unreachable. That is a very special kind of annoying. Standing in your own hallway, jabbing at a switch that worked fine an hour ago. 2, the company's servers go down. It's the same outcome as before, except now it's not even anything you did, and there's nothing you can do but wait and hope that somebody in an office somewhere is having a worse day than you. And 3, which is the big one for me, the company just decides it's finished with that product. Maybe the company gets bought out, or it changes direction, or maybe it even goes under. Maybe the company's looking at the books one day and decides that maintaining the servers powering your 3-year-old gadget just isn't worth keeping the lights on for anymore. And then one morning the app just stops working and your perfectly good hardware turns into a rather expensive lump of nothing. That's not a random example, by the way. There's a smart home company called Insteon, which has been around for years and is a big, proper name in the hobby. And then one day, back in 2022, they just switched the servers off. No real warning, the app stopped working and thousands of people woke up to a smart home that had gone dumb overnight through no fault of their own. It was so abrupt that people were being warned not to reset their hubs because setting one back up needed the servers, and the servers were gone. Kit that people had bought in good faith, that worked fine, all of it suddenly leaning on a company that had stopped answering the phone. And that, right there, is the whole thing in one story. If you own the hardware, but you don't own the bit that actually makes it work, and you don't really own it at all, you're renting, and the landlord can bugger off whenever they fancy. So this rule is simple. I want to be in charge of my own stuff. If I buy a thing, I want it to keep working because it's mine, not because some company 3 times away is feeling generous this financial quarter. And when my internet drops, I want the house to just carry on like nothing happened. 2, most Wi-Fi smart home gadgets are the wrong tool, and I own loads of them. This one goes a bit nerdy for a moment, so stick with me because it really does save you quite a bit of grief. Most of the little Wi-Fi smart home gadgets out there are, in my opinion, a mistake. Not all of them, mind. Some things properly earn their Wi-Fi. Your voice assistant, the Echo, the Nest, whatever you've got on the shelf, that thing's streaming audio, and it's plugged into the wall, so fair enough, Wi-Fi's the right call. Your robot vacuum cleaner, it needs a proper connection to sort its maps out, and again, fine, no argument, those are the right jobs for a Wi-Fi device. But the little things, the sensors, the bulbs, the plugs, the switches, the stuff that you somehow end up owning 30 of without even really noticing, those, I believe, should never be on Wi-Fi. They want a proper low-power protocol built for exactly this job, something like Zigbee or Thread. The reason why is that Wi-Fi is thirsty. The radio inside a Wi-Fi doodad actually uses quite a bit of power, which is fine for something bolted to the wall, and absolutely terrible for a little battery-powered sensor you want it to fit and then forget about. Put a battery-powered door sensor on Wi-Fi and you'll be changing that battery constantly, cursing its name. Put the exact same sensor on Zigbee and it'll happily trundle along for a year or 2 before the batteries need replacing. Because these protocols are built from the ground up to whisper, not yell. Then there's the crowding. Your home router was designed on the assumption that you plug in, what, a laptop, a couple of phones, the telly. It wasn't designed for you to bolt 40 chattering little gadgets onto it. Do that and the whole network starts getting a bit stressed and sulky. Things drop offline, things lag, and you end up spending your evenings rebooting a router instead of enjoying the smart home that you spent all of that money on. Zigbee and Thread just sidestep that whole mess. They run their own little mesh off to one side, but the devices actually help each other pass the messages along instead of all 40 of them screaming at one poor overwhelmed router. I learned this the expensive way, obviously, by buying a pile of Wi-Fi tap first and then slowly and grumpily swapping it all out for the proper stuff. You get to just skip to the proper stuff. Look at you. By the way, if you want to learn more about the different protocols, I've done a video of it. I'll pop a link somewhere around here and there'll be one down below as well. 3. The clever automation you're so proud of will probably let you down. Complex automations are enormous fun to build, but most of the time, they're actually kind of rubbish to live with. Oh, I love a good automation. Sitting there wiring up the conditions, if this and then that, but not that, unless it happens on a Tuesday. That's one of the best bits of the whole hobby for me. It feels like actual magic the first time it fires. The problem is hiding in one little word. When. Because real life is messy. It's full of exceptions. You've got a guest staying over, or you're off work poorly, or you've dragged yourself out of bed at some godly hour for a flight, and suddenly your beautiful automation is doing precisely the wrong thing at precisely the wrong moment because you built it for a version of your life that runs neatly on rails. Every extra condition you bolt on to cope with the mess is one more thing that can break. So you end up at one of two dead ends. Either a great, groaning, over-engineered contraption with 50 moving parts, any one of which can fail over at any moment, or something simpler that just isn't reliable enough for you to actually trust. I've been guilty of it countless times. I'll probably even do it again in the future because, like I said, it's fun, dude, but the more complex the automation, the more likely it is to have an edge case you never thought of, and after the 5th or 6th edge case causes your automations to fail, the reality of it starts making the whole thing a hell of a lot less fun. And the sad truth of it is, the way we do automations right now, this rigid if this then that business, just isn't clever enough to handle a real human life yet. Maybe one day we'll have something in the house that properly understands context, that knows the difference between he's up early because he's got a flight to catch, or he's up early because he's getting a drink and we'll go back to bed in a few minutes, and then it'll do the right thing without being told. We're not there yet though, although I think we might be close, but until we get there, I've made my peace with something that sounds a bit boring. For most things, just use a button. Physical button, that when you press it, it does exactly what you asked. Every single time. And it never once decides that 11:30 at night is the perfect moment to throw every light in the house on and activate red alert mode because a spider strolled past the sensor. 4. You almost certainly didn't need to buy that big expensive server that you got. Okay, this one was a very expensive lesson for me, so I really hope you see this video before you make the same mistake, and you might have to indulge some "past me was an idiot" groaning in the background here. Almost nothing that a normal person actually wants to run at home needs a powerful server. Almost nothing. When I first got into homelabs, I got it fixed in my head that I was supposed to have proper enterprise kit. I'm talking the rack-mounted stuff that sounds like a lawnmower and costs the earth to run. A serious-looking gear that makes you feel like you know what you're doing the second you just glance at it. So off I went and I bought exactly that. And look, I don't fully regret it because I learned an absolute ton about running proper servers, and that knowledge is really useful to my career, but oh my god, was that a lot of money. It was expensive to buy, and it ran hot enough to warm the room, and worst of all, it was loud. Like, seriously loud. The kind of loud you can hear through multiple walls. The kind of loud that you start to resent. The thing is, the stuff that most people actually need. Home Assistant to run the smart home. AdGuard to swallow up all the ads. Nextcloud so your files live with you instead of in the cloud. All of that sips power. You can run the whole lot on a cheap little mini PC. The sort of thing that sits in the palm of your hand and makes no noise at all, and still have quite a bit of headroom to spare. There are a couple of exceptions, mind you. If you want like a Plex server that's transcoding video for the entire family, then a bit of graphics grunt does help. If you want to run your own AI models at home, then that one really does want a proper graphics card and a pretty beefy RAM pack machine, but even for the transcoding, you do not need some monstrous £1,000 top-of-the-range graphics card to do all of it. The modest little graphics card built into a cheap mini PC will chew through that quite happily for a lot of people. These days I do run more than I strictly need to, and I'll be straight with you, that's purely because I find it fun. It's a hobby, I'm allowed a treat. But if you stripped it right back to what I actually need day to day, the smart home, the handy little services, the boring useful stuff, then a mini PC that costs around £200 or less would do the entire job and then some. I'll drop a link to the sort of thing I mean down below. If you buy through that link, I'll get a few quid at no extra cost to you, and I'd be really, really grateful. But start small. You can always grow into more later once you actually know what you need it for. That's the bit I got completely backwards. 5. Security isn't paranoia, it's just doing the boring bit properly. This brings me all the way back around to that camera. When I caught that cheap camera, posting my data off to who knows where, I had a choice about what to learn from it. And there's a really tempting wrong answer sitting right there, which is to decide that cheap kit is dangerous and then go and spend a fortune on the posh kit instead. I want to talk you out of that one because it's a load of rubbish. Cheap kit is fine. I still buy cheap kit to this day, and even though that specific camera is no longer on my network, similarly cheap Chinese cameras absolutely still are. Spending more money was never the answer. The actual lesson is if you are going to bring a cheap and cheerful whoever made this little device into your home, you just need to do the extra little bit of work to keep it on a short lead. So I did what any of us do when something's weird. I googled it. And somebody on a forum said the magic word, which was VLAN. Now, I'd never heard of a VLAN in my life at that point, but the idea underneath it is dead simple. You put your dodgy little devices onto their own separate network, walled off from everything else, just for them, and then you cut off their access to the internet entirely. Lovely. The problem was, when I went to actually do it, I found out my router at the time, which was some off-the-shelf commercial box that I got from my ISP, couldn't do VLANs at all. So I didn't do it properly. I did a version that I could actually manage with the kit that I already had. I shoved the camera onto my guest network, which I never used anyway, and then I cut that whole guest network off from the internet. It was a bit of a bodge, to be honest, but I got lucky and it worked. The camera could still do its job, but it physically couldn't phone home anymore because I'd taken its phone from it. And that's kind of the point of all of this. You treat the thing as if you don't trust it, because you probably shouldn't. That camera business was the start of it, really. It planted a seed, but the penny didn't fully drop for me until quite a few years later, and it was a completely different bit of kit that finally hammered the point home, because a few years down the line, I had some Belkin Wemo smart plugs, and I had them wired into Home Assistant, so in my head I was clearly in control here. This was my setup, with my rules. Then one day I finally got a router that could support VLANs, and then when I cut the Wemos off from the internet, they just stopped. Turned out they were barely talking to me at all. Every single command was going out to Belkin's cloud and coming back, even though the plug was sat in the same room as me the whole time. I only found out because when I pulled the internet, I watched it all keel over. So I thought, right, fine, I'll do this properly. So I got rid of all of them and replaced them with TP-Link's Tapo plugs instead, because those supported local control. Actual, proper, works without the internet, local control, and they did a great job for years. Notice I said did, because a short while ago, a firmware update landed and then switched that local control off. The one thing that I had specifically bought them for, just gone in an update that I never asked for and couldn't say no to. You can dig around and turn it back on if you know where to look, but that's not really the point, is it? The point is that a company reached into a plug in my house and changed how it worked, and I just had to sit there and take it. Well, actually no, I personally didn't have to do that because mine were cut off from the internet, remember? So, provided I never connect those plugs to the internet again, they actually will still continue to support local control. However, they're Wi-Fi plugs and I've long since moved on to Zigbee ones, so they'll probably end up getting sold on eBay at some point. Anyway, I digress. That right there, that was the moment the whole thing clicked into place for me. Everything I'd been grumbling about with the cloud and everything I'd learned the hard way about Wi-Fi turned out to be the exact same lesson as this one about owning my own things. It was all the same lesson, just wearing different hats, because there's a thread running through all 5 of these once you stand back and look at them together. Owning your own stuff instead of renting it from the cloud. Using the right cheap little protocol instead of 40 gadgets fighting over your Wi-Fi. Reaching for a £2 button instead of a fragile automation with 50 ways to fail. £200 mini PC instead of a rack of enterprise gear that heats the room and deafens the cat. And a cheap camera made perfectly safe by walling it off on its own network. 5 different lessons, but every single one of them is really saying the same thing. This hobby doesn't have to be expensive. It really doesn't. If you put a bit of thought in, you can do so much more than you'd ever expect with a cheap kit, or even with the kit that you'd already discounted and shoved in a drawer. You just have to be willing to work a little bit harder for it. To learn the why, to do the fiddly bit, to take the slightly harder road that leaves you actually owning what you built. Thoughtful and cheap beats expensive and lazy nearly every single time. These are things I wish somebody had told me when I was standing exactly where a lot of you are standing right now. At the start of a very fun journey, about to spend money I didn't need to spend. If even one of these tips saves you a bit of that, then this video was worth making. So go and have a proper play. Break a few things, it's the best way to learn, and it costs less than you think. Ta-da!